Coming up this week on the EV Resource Podcast, a whole lot of Tesla news and one Hummer EV. Hello friends, welcome to episode 38 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and answers to your questions about electric vehicles. I want to thank those of you who gave me the understanding for the impromptu week away last weekend to care for the most adorable bundle of cuteness. If you haven't been following along on social media, my wife and I discovered an abandoned kitten in our backyard and have been nursing it back to health. His name is Aries. He is the most adorable little ginger kitten, and actually I created a Twitter account for him, so you can search for Aries the Ginger Kitten or Aries the Ginger Cat on Twitter if you want to follow along all of the cuteness thereof. And it has been a busy week for sure. But getting straight into the EV news this week, last episode I was talking about some of the changes to the Model 3 that were being noticed, but at that time nothing had been officially mentioned by Tesla by the time I was recording the episode. So since then, of course, the Tesla Model 3 has officially been updated, and the various improvements are now available on Tesla's website. There are many subtle changes, but let's take a look at the range first. The standard range plus Model 3 had a range increase from 250 miles. They added 13, so now it has 263 miles of range. The long-range Model 3 actually went up the most. It went from 322 miles to now 353 miles, or 31 miles more. And the Model 3 performance range increased by 16 miles from 299 up to 315. In addition to that, all versions of the Model 3 received a power lift trunk, chrome delete, or if the chrome was never there, you could just say a black kind of satin trim along the windows and the door handles and the repeater cameras on the front fenders. A heat pump, which of course comes over from the Model Y, making it more efficient, and certainly that would be at least a part of the reason for the range boost. Although I did find out or hear, I don't remember where I heard it, that the Standard Range Plus might not actually be getting the heat pump, but that needs to be verified. So if any of you know one way or the other, let me know. Reach out, because I would definitely love to get more of a concrete answer for that one. There were some interior trim changes to the console. Of course, I showed the photos of that, and then some new and different wheel options. There are some new special wheels on the performance model. And something really cool, the performance model used to have a 0 to 60 time officially of 3.2 seconds. Well, that has been reduced to 3.1 on paper. I know there have been some occurrences of people being able to get 3.1 seconds with the Model 3 performance before this change. So maybe we'll see down around 3.0 or even sub 3 seconds 0 to 60. But either way, even at 3.1 seconds, that is absolutely insane performance for a car that only costs $55,000. In addition to the Model 3, the range of the S, X, and Y were also updated and improved, and in the case of the Model S, have had some serious price cuts as well. Going back and forth, Tesla had lowered the price of the Model S by, I believe, about $3,000. The base Model S, not the Performance or the Plaid. And then Lucid actually came out and said that the base model for the Lucid Air is going to cost $69,990, just under $70,000. Well, Elon responded very quickly on Twitter and said that the Model S they were going to drop the price again, and that night would be $69,420, making both a joke to 69 being more of a sexual term, and then 420 being a term for marijuana. Both numbers that Elon seems to be, maybe it's the 12-year-old boy in him, or in all of us, really, because I think it's hilarious too. But where was I going with that? I don't know. Anyway, so they lowered the price of the Model S, and that, I mean, they're lowering it to compete with a car that's not even out yet. So I'm not exactly sure what the urgency was on that, but either way, it happened. You can now get a base model Model S for $69,420. In the world of Tesla, that's kind of all old news, believe it or not, because that happened like 2 weeks ago. And Tesla moves really, really quickly. And the Tesla news, it would seem, moves even quicker. So moving past that, because I know I missed last week's episode, and I would have mentioned all that last week. This week, Tesla had their Q3 earnings call, and they blew away the Wall Street expectations. Analysts on Wall Street were expecting revenue of about $8.2 billion for the quarter and a gain of 55 cents per share. Well, Tesla managed to destroy those expectations with $8.7 billion of revenue and a gain of 76 cents per share. So this now makes the 5th quarter in a row that Tesla has posted a profit and further legitimizes their place in the automotive space. Those people that said, oh, Tesla's not a profitable company or they can't make a car profitably, it's kind of a smackdown to that. Those claims are just, they have no legitimacy anymore. Now, the Tesla news this week wasn't all good. China's State Administration for Market Regulation announced Thursday night that Tesla will be recalling up to 48,000 Model S and Model X vehicles that were made in the US but sold to customers in China over potentially faulty and unsafe front and rear suspensions. Now, Tesla alleges that the recall isn't actually necessary, but that they are complying in order to maintain a good relationship with the Chinese government. Tesla said that the failure in question has happened less than 0.05% of vehicles that are outside of China, and then in China, 0.1%. It's currently unknown why the failure rate is actually double for vehicles being driven in China, and that might be part of the reason why the China State Department of Market Regulation was asking, or you might say forcing, encouraging Tesla to do this recall. Maybe it's something about Chinese roads, maybe it's something about Chinese drivers, who knows, but either way, it's the same vehicles that are being driven everywhere else, but yet the failures are happening twice as much. So I don't know. But even then, 0.1% of the vehicles are having failures. I don't know really if that's enough for a legitimate recall. And it just seems like there's more going on behind the curtains that we might not know at this point. And the last bit of Tesla news I have for you this week is on a positive note, though. Tesla released their beta version of full self-driving to a limited number of customers that were specifically chosen by them to test the software and provide feedback. The chosen few were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, but were allowed to post on social media some of their experiences, and it would seem it's largely been going well. I want to share with you some of the examples of Teslas making left turns through intersections and even taking a roundabout better than most humans that I've seen, or most human drivers have an issue with roundabouts, at least in this country. I'm sure in Europe they're much better at it because there's a lot more roundabouts in Europe. Now, for those of you who are listening only, you're audio only on a podcast platform, you might want to check out the YouTube video for this of the podcast for this bit, so that you can see the Teslas going through all this instead of just hearing the audio from the few clips of the YouTube videos I'm going to share with you right now.
We got a stoplight. Blinker is on. There is a person in front of me.
Oh my God. It's... Oh, no way.
No way, dude.
Wow.
What?
No hands on the steering
No
wheel.
hands on. Oh my, wow.
Full self-driving is
Here we are. Beta is amazing.
Now, this next clip doesn't have any audio, so I'll just kind of talk over it. And the Tesla comes up to a roundabout, comes to a stop before continuing on straight through it, but it executes that just the way a human would. Absolutely spectacular. Now, moving on from Tesla to finally get to the headline story of the week. During Game 1 of the World Series Tuesday night, GM introduced the world to the GMC Hummer EV. Now, of course, the last episode I went over some of the vehicle specifications, but assuming you missed it, I'm going to go over all the details right now. So the top spec Edition 1 is equipped with 3 electric motors, one in the front and 2 in the rear on each wheel, that combined produce 1,000 horsepower and, according to GM, 11,500 pound-feet of torque. However, this torque figure is a little suspect, and I've found out why. Most of the time, power figures are measured at the motor, or with gas-powered vehicles at the engine. It is the specific output of the propulsion device that's usually shown in the claimed numbers. However, GM seems to want to play games, as they've measured the torque at where the wheels meet the ground. And in this case, that would mean that the torque number gets multiplied by the gearing and ultimately the circumference of the wheel and tire, giving them that inflated number. Real torque estimates at the motors put the output at around 800 to 1,000 pound-feet, which is certainly respectable, but definitely more realistic. And personally, this is kind of a rub, because had they led with the real numbers instead of playing games, I'd probably have a much better feeling about this truck. But they want to play games, and I suppose this is the best time while I'm bashing GM for their decisions. I'll also throw in the only other thing about this that has irked me about the Hummer EV. And it's actually not something about the vehicle itself with this either. It's all about GM and the way they're making their decisions. They haven't actually built the Hummer EV. They haven't built a production almost ready model, I guess is the best way to say it. They have a display model. And everything that we've seen, all the videos, everything has just been this display model. Inside EVs earlier this week reported that chief engineer Al Oppenheimer had even admitted to this, saying, quote, "Interestingly enough, we don't have a vehicle yet. We're building our first test vehicle as we speak. The vehicle you see in the video is our display vehicle," end quote. Inside EVs continued to report that while this may be shocking, it is becoming increasingly common. Startups and automakers are showing off future vehicles without actually having a vehicle developed. Another example of this, of course, is GM is currently working with Nikola, that partnership that I've talked about plenty, to develop the Nikola Badger electric pickup truck, which when it was unveiled, it was just in the form of a bunch of renderings. So depending on how you look at this, it isn't all that different from the days of concept cars at auto shows. They were there for people to look over and drool over, if you will, but weren't typically working models of the vehicles. However, we can argue that this is really much different, since GM in this case are touting specs for these cars, taking reservations and taking people's money and treating them as if they are production vehicles, while not actually having a production-ready example on hand. Okay, so back to the Hummer and all its super truck glory. They actually call it the world's first super truck. GM's PR department, or marketing department, I guess better, has really gotten a hold of this this vehicle and everything that about it. But they estimate that the top spec first edition is going to have 350 plus miles of range, a 0 to 60 time of about 3 seconds. The Infinity Roof, once again, the marketing department, as they're calling it, is modular and can be removed in 4 separate panels above the front and rear of the cabin. And with the lowering of a rear window, it gives a very open air feeling, much like you would get from a Jeep, for example. The roof panels, when they're not being used, can be stored in the massive front trunk underneath the hood, so you can take them along with you on your journey. GM will equip the Hummer EV with their latest version of Super Cruise, their driver assist software that allows for hands-free driving and automatic lane changing on what they're calling, quote, compatible roads, end quote, which at this time, it would be approximately 200,000 miles of roads in the US and Canada. It will also come with 4-wheel steering that allows the rear wheels to turn up to 10 degrees to the left or right. That allows for reduced turning radius and what they're calling crab mode, where the front and rear wheels are actually turned in the same direction and propel the Hummer in a diagonal direction. They claim to have charging capability of up to 350 kilowatts on an 800-volt system, but the 800-volt system is basically achieved by taking two 400-volt battery packs and putting them one on top of another and then wiring them in series. Now, that they say that will allow users to recharge 100 miles of range in as little as 10 minutes. But the Hummer EV isn't really going to be marketed towards people that are going to use it in a way that they want a lot of range really quickly. Like if you were going on a highway road trip, it's not marketed or really designed to be a highway vehicle. It's marketed towards those that want to have an off-road adventure, which if you're going off-road, chances are you're not going to be around fast chargers, especially 350 kilowatt fast chargers on an 800-volt system. That just seems a little ridiculous, but maybe I'm looking into it too much. It's going to have 35-inch tires coming from the factory, but be capable of handling 37-inch tires. And a big reason for that is to have a very impressive ground clearance. Now, it's variable. They are saying that at its lowest point, it'll be 8 inches off the ground clearance. And that is for when it's driving on the highway. So it kind of hunkers down to try to improve the aerodynamics, even though it's basically a rolling brick. So I don't know how much that would help. But the less air that goes underneath any vehicle, when it comes to aerodynamics, the better. But the key here is that it can increase to as much as 19.5 inches of ground clearance using an adaptive air ride suspension. They have also equipped the Hummer with what they're calling Ultra Vision. I mentioned that last time when I was talking about preparing for the reveal event. We now know that this is talking about 18 cameras surrounding the vehicle, with even 2 cameras underneath, forward and rear facing. For off-roaders, having cameras underneath the truck is really valuable because you can see rocks and other obstacles that you might want to avoid. Now, I know what you're thinking, and because I was thinking this too. Won't those cameras get dirty? And yeah, that's exactly, I mean, the first thought that I had when I saw that was, oh, they're going to get dirty and then you can't use them. Well, GM prepared for this, and they have equipped the Hummer with sprayers that will spray down the cameras and clean them off when needed. Additionally, on the bottom, it has full body armor and rock sliders to protect the battery pack and motor components and everything else from the undoubted abuse that they are going to get when they're going off-road. Now, to the price, even while costing $112,000. I'll pause and let you kind of take that in. $112,000. This first edition actually sold out very quickly. I believe it was within a few hours. And while GM hasn't actually told us how many units were reserved for the first edition, I can only assume that it was enough to satisfy GM. But those that did reserve the first edition Hummer EV are going to have to wait until fall of next year for production to begin. Now, there will be 3 other versions of the Hummer EV. So the first edition, of course, available at the fall of next year, or production starting fall of next year. Then the Hummer EV 3X, a $100,000 trim level that is offering 3 motors, but slightly less power and less range. That should be coming a year later in the fall of 2022. The $90,000 Hummer 2X with 2 motors, 300 plus miles of range, and only 625 horsepower, not the 1,000. Coming, 625 still plenty, believe me. I'm sure that'll be fine. That comes in spring of 2023. And then those that want to wait for the least expensive option, it is $80,000. That's the Hummer EV2 with 250 miles of range, the same 2 motors and 625 horsepower. But you'll have to wait the longest until spring of 2024. Or you could just go out and buy the top spec Cybertruck with 500 plus miles of range and full self-driving to produce late next year. Oops. Did I mention that? Come on, it was the gorilla in the room, right? Look, I don't doubt that the Hummer EV is going to be a great vehicle, but you really have to want a Hummer EV in order to buy it. Obviously, it's not the best choice when it comes to comparing pricing and comparing specs. people have been talking about how the Hummer EV compares to the Cybertruck and also to the Rivian R1T. But honestly, for those with six figures to drop on a vehicle, maybe price and function aren't really that important. I don't know. People do strange things. Oh, and yeah, that's the end of the news for this week. But the strange things reminds me, go out and vote if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you. We have to remember that we're all in this together, and real change only happens when you take an active role in steering your world in a better direction. And as skeptical and cynical as I would love to be when it comes to politics, your vote, or at least in the US, your vote is really the one way that we all have in having a voice in how things are done. So strange as things might be politically, one way or the other, I'm not going to even get into all of that. Just go out there and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard. Okay, so that is your show for this week. A couple of announcements, and I'll let you go. That is to say that you've made it this far, so why not hang on just for a couple more minutes? I do want to thank you very, very much for your support. Even if you're just watching or listening, it means so much to me that you take your time and spend it here. You don't have to, and your time is valuable, so I really appreciate that. And while I have you, I'd like to encourage you to share this podcast with a friend or a family member or somebody that you think would enjoy learning about EVs and the latest happenings in the EV world. So this show is made possible in part by our show partner, Titan Auto and Tire in Moseley, Virginia. Titan is the premier independent shop in Central Virginia that is qualified to work on EVs and hybrids. And from hybrids to Hummers, they fix everything. Maybe you can take your Hummer EV to see them when you get it. Our awesome Patreon family also keeps us afloat. Our Patreon executive producer is Tom Wiggins. To be a patron of EV Resource, you can go to patreon.com/EV Resource. Patreon is spelled Patreon. And as for as little as $1 a month, you can show your support for EV Resource. In exchange, we offer different benefits for each tier level, but everybody gets full access to the monthly EV Resource magazine. And believe me, we should be charging a lot more than just $1 for that alone. But don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, and please, please leave me a comment in the YouTube video and let me know what you think about the show. I love feedback. You can also email me at hello@ev-resource.com. And lastly, and I have mentioned this before, EV Resource is now offering a service to check the state of health for EV batteries in used cars. So if you are in the Central Virginia area within 100 miles of Richmond and you're buying a used EV, request that whoever you're looking at buying it from, the seller, have them reach out to us in order to get the battery tested. If you're an EV owner in Central Virginia, we'll actually test your battery for free if you just have us come out and arrange time that we can get our hands on the car. And that is free now for the time being. But we're offering this because we want to build a database and a history of battery health for all EV makes and models, even hybrids. So it's really important. And if you've got an EV and you want us to test the battery, let me know. I mean, once again, email or whatever, you can just reach out. If you don't live in Central Virginia, and I recognize that a lot of you that watch and listen to this don't, but you're able to test the battery health on your own, we'd love to know your results and include that information in our database. So just reach out at hello@evresource.com and we can coordinate how to do that. So that is it for this week. Thank you so much for being with me, and I'll catch you next time.